All right, how's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be looking at the bony landmarks of the scapula and the clavicle. First, we're going to be starting with the scapula here. Again, it's going to be a quiz-style video, so I will go through each landmark on a specific view, number each one, and you can pause the video, answer it, come back, and then we'll go through it together. All right, so starting with number one will be this guy right here, number one. So again, you can come back, pause the video and come back and we'll go through it together. Number two is going to be this guy up here. Number three is going to be this edge right here. Number four will be this part right here. And number five will be this little divot right there. And then number six, the last one for this view, will be this space right there. All right, so again, pause the video, answer all of these, come back, and then we'll go through the answers. All right, so number one is going to be our inferior angle. And then number two will be our superior angle. So this part right here, and then the inferior angle is this part down here. Number three, this was going to be our lateral border. And then on the opposite side, we're going to have our medial border. Number six is going to be our supra, suprascapular notch. So suprascapular notch. And that's this little divot right here. And then number six is pointing to the subscapular fossa. All right, so we'll get a different view, and then we'll come back and do a couple more. Okay, so now we have a different angle here of the scapula. First, I'm going to want you to identify, is this, so let me do this again. So number one for this side, is this the posterior side or the anterior side of the scapula? And then number two for this side is going to be, is it a left or right scapula? And then number three is going to be this space underneath this bony protrusion here. This is going to be 3. And then this bony protrusion itself will make this 4. And then this guy right here, kind of an extension of number 4. This is going to be number 5. And then number 6 is going to be the space above number 4. So that'll be number 6. All right, pause the video, answer them, and we'll come back. Okay, so when we're looking at our scapula to determine whether it's posterior or anterior side, you're going to want to look for this big bony protrusion back here. So this guy is always going to be facing posterior. So now we're looking at the posterior side. All right, now to determine if it's a left or right, we have to find our medial and lateral borders. So if we go back to that other angle, like we talked about earlier, this side right here is going to be our medial border, and this is our lateral border. So if we think about it, take the scapula off of the screen, we know it's posterior side, we know we have our medial border, our lateral border, try and put it on your body, kind of see what side it is, and that's going to be our left side. All right, number 3, so this space underneath the protrusion here, this is going to be our infraspinous fossa. So infraspinous fossa below the spine right here. Number 4, so like we said with infraspinous fossa, this is going to be the spine itself. So S for spine. And then number 5, kind of an extension or continuation of the spine. This is going to be our acromion process. And then number 6, so if this is the infraspinous fossa down here for number 3, above the spine is going to be our supraspinous fossa. So yeah, all these landmarks, just look, if you can find the spine, then you'll be able to identify where the supraspinous fossa is, where the infraspinous fossa is, and the acromion process. So at least when I'm learning them or trying to remember them, I'm always going to look for that spine first, and then it'll tell me where everything else is. All right, let's get a different angle and continue on. Okay, so now we're looking at a different angle here. Now we're looking at the lateral side of the scapula here. So again, here's our spine right here, and then our acromion process. Back here is our medial border, our lateral border right here, just to get our bearings here. So we're going to start off with this guy right here, which will be number 1. This area right here, which will be number 2. And then this spot down here, which will be number 3. And then this whole space right there that I circled is going to be number 4. And then number 5 will be this little kind of dent right here in between the acromion and number 1. So this will be number 5. Okay, pause the video, answer them, come back, and we'll go through it. All right, so number 1, if this guy right here is our acromion process, the one next to it is going to be our coracoid process. Oop. Coracoid process. Number 2, well, actually, let's start with number 4. So number 4 is going to be our glenoid cavity or glenoid fossa. So GF for glenoid fossa. Or you could put GC for glenoid cavity. So number 4 is our glenoid cavity, and we have this bony protrusion up at the top here. This is going to be our supraglenoid tubercle. And so if number 2 is the supraglenoid tubercle, and we go below the glenoid cavity now, this will be our infraglenoid tubercle. So again, we're looking at the lateral side here. Another way you can try and find the lateral and medial border. The lateral border is going to be on the side of that glenoid fossa or glenoid cavity right here. All right, so let's pause and we'll come back and look at one more thing. One more thing, actually, before we leave this. I think I may have forgotten to identify this spot right here. This is going to be your spinoglenoid notch, or your supra spine, or actually, I'm sorry, your greater scapular notch. So either your greater scapular notch or your spinoglenoid notch. So that'll be that spot right there. All right, so those will be all the landmarks for the scapula. But I went through each angle to show where the landmarks would be most visible. But you should be able to identify all the landmarks from every angle and every view of the scapula. So if we're looking at the subscapular fossa side or the anterior side, you should be able to still identify your suprascapular or your supraglenoid notch. I'm sorry, your supraglenoid tubercle, your infraglenoid tubercle, your coracoid process, acromion process. You should be able to identify all of those from the anterior side, the posterior side, your medial lateral border. Should be able to identify everything from every angle. All right, so now we'll move on to the clavicle. All right, so before we move on to the landmarks of the clavicle, just for a little perspective here, this is how the clavicle and the scapula connect to each other. So you see here, we'll go over these landmarks when we dive deeper into them, but you can see that this end of the clavicle attaches right up to this acromion process here, like we said before, and then this is going to attach to another bone over here, which we'll talk about later. All right, so let's get into it. Okay, so let's get into some of these landmarks here. All right, so first we're going to start with this end right here will be number 1. This side over here will be number 2. And then this little bump right here will be number 3. All right, so pause the video, come back, and we'll go through them. All right, so number 1, like we saw before, this side, I like to kind of look at my clavicle as kind of like a big S with one really big curve here and then a smaller, tinier curve right there. And so the smaller, tinier curve is going to be facing our acromial end. So this is the acromial end. And like we saw before, this attaches right up to your acromion process. So if this is our acromial end, over here, this is going to attach up to our sternum, and this will be our sternal end. So each side is labeled based on the next bone that it attaches to. So this side acromial end, this side sternal end. Then number 3, this bump right here that I highlighted, this is going to be your conoid tubercle. And this little bump right here, kind of on the opposite side of this smaller curve. All right, so those are all the landmarks, but let's take a look at some different angles to try and see what everything looks like. Okay, so before we were looking at a superior view, so looking top down, and now we're going to be looking at a inferior view, so looking bottom up. So again, this would be our acromial end, because you can see here the smaller angle right here of our S is the acromial end, and then the larger curve right here would be our sternal end. And so on this side, you can really see that bump of the conoid tubercle right there, really poking out. So again, this would be our conoid tubercle. So just kind of looking at things from an inferior angle instead of a superior angle. All right, so those are all the bony landmarks for the clavicle and the scapula. 2 bones kind of connect your arms to the rest of your body, basically. So really important bones. Make sure you learn all the landmarks from different angles. So yeah, if you have any questions, make sure you email a TA or one of the professors, your lab instructor, and we'll get back to you. So yeah, hope you guys have a good one. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.